really want to continue this conversation, but really kind of focus it within the commission and the commissioners. If there are some other things that our panelists can help us elucidate, that would be great. But we want to make sure that we're continuing to have this bit of a conversation. One of the questions I'll start us out at sort of at this point in the conversation is, what would a regional cost share model, and I'm not looking for the design of it and who pays what piece of it, but it's been talked about a little bit that this isn't only a federal problem, this isn't only Illinois' problem, this is a regional issue that we're trying to solve. What would that regional cost share start to look like? What would the elements of that be? And I feel that we're a bit at it, maybe we're a little ahead of it because we don't know the answer technically, but in other ways we're sort of looking at a bit of a chicken and the egg. No one wants to put the dollar on the table because I don't know if somebody else is going to put the dollar on the table. So how do we start to open that one up a little bit as we continue down the path? So Illinois doesn't feel like if they put up their hand, they got the whole cost, or that we continue to beat on the core to make sure that they absorb the whole cost. How do we start seeing this collaboratively? I thought you'd have the answer, Kate.
It is a question as a initial and probably the best attendance record for the advisory committee since January of 2010 when we convened, that we've asked over and over. At times in referencing the Restore the Natural Divide cost figure that was included in there, I believe when we asked Tim and staff as to how that figure per family per year was calculated, it was based on literally those homesteads that stretch the waterway and up into Canada. And many comments have been made that if this is to seriously look at protecting the Great Lakes from two-way and or one-way invasive species, that the cost should be shared much more broadly than Chicago and Indiana. As an advisory committee, we did have an economist talk to us a number of years ago on this issue, but I think we scared the bejeebies out of him, and I don't ever recall seeing an answer from him on his words of wisdom going forward. It certainly will be a monumental task, second only to the replumbing.
Scared them or hoping for an RFP, right? We're nowhere ready for an RFP for something like that. But it is a very interesting challenge. In Indiana, it took us 3 years to pass a per house figure to meet the maintenance costs for our flood control project. And that was a very difficult battle, trying to educate the public there on why their homes were being protected by this project that may have been 10 or 15 miles from their actual home because of the watershed. So to try to engage the other states, such as all of us sitting around this table, and the provinces on, be prepared for your fair share kind of discussions, it's a challenge. And we certainly, one of the shortcomings I would say from what we've learned from this process is we did not pull as many people to the table that I think we should have over the past 5 years to have a better understanding, because when we do make a recommendation, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be very surprised. I do think so.
Thank you, John. I think the place where you have to start in looking at this issue is where will the benefits and the cost avoidances, if you will, be realized as a result of a project like this going forward. And the interesting dynamic that we have here, and from the outset we've looked at, 4 essential elements associated with it: invasive species, water quality, flood control, and transportation. And each one of those has kind of a different dynamic to it. And, just take invasive species as an example, and I guess I'll use a figure that I understand comes from your governor, roughly $4 billion a year, the cost on the Great Lakes. And I think as Joel responded to Don's question, in terms of quantifying, what the downsides could be for the Great Lakes, it's really, really a tough thing to do. But the benefits of keeping them out, I think, will be realized Great Lakes wide. And, my Canadian brothers and sisters, I'm sure, are prepared to step up to the plate with foreign aid or whatever to help out ultimately on any kind of solution with the primary vector. Transportation, probably the regional or the local economy, local, I'll say Chicago, Northwest Indiana, benefits the most from the transportation system, but regionally and nationally, there are benefits as well. Flood control, probably more local than it is regional or national. Water quality, I would say probably more local, maybe regional, hard to make that case nationally. I think if you do the work that's necessary to assess all of those different elements, you can come up with something that is national, regional, and local. And as a ratepayer to David St. Pierre, I think we're going to wind up picking up a pretty good chunk of the tab. And I think that's probably fair and right because of the water quality benefits and flood control benefits. But to really make this a doable thing, I do think it has to be looked at a local, regional, and national standpoint. You know, it's probably not a one-third, 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 and you know, whatever Canada out of its graciousness comes forward with. But I think that's kind of where you have to start. We did some work on that in the first phase of all of this, but a lot more work needs to be done. But that's where I would suggest to start in trying to come up with a fair split of who's going to pick up the tab.
I think your notion of sort of parsing out those individual pieces and understanding that they have different footprints and different sort of benefits and costs is a very interesting avenue to start down. If we try to treat it as one big lump and try to apportion one big lump with different distributions of costs and benefits, it gets to be a very different problem to solve. So thank you for that. Couple questions down here, and then Helen, I know you had a comment you wanted to make earlier.
Me first. The interesting part is, for me to wrap my head around this, you know, right now we have Brandon Road. Corps has authority to study. We heard the ASA talk about that project a little bit. It's really getting going. Brandon Road fix really doesn't provide all the other benefits you mentioned, David. It's not hard to imagine how some type of fix at Brandon Road could run up to $500 million. I mean, right now they're rebuilding Olmsted Lock and Dam, and I think they've crossed the $3 billion mark. Maybe that's, I think I'm in the ballpark. So working on a lock is extraordinarily expensive. So you say it's $500 million, and the Corps is looking for a non-federal sponsor at 35%. That's $175 million. You divide that by 8 states, you got $22 million. That's just a ballpark number. So when you talk about cost sharing and how you parse out benefits, that really is a risk reduction for Asian carp. I will be the most surprised guy in the room if the governors of the other 7 Great Lakes states are ready to write a check to the Corps for $22 million. But, you know, I remain to be surprised. But I think one of the challenges is, you know, we will have to look as a group at that risk. You know, the ASA defined what prevention meant in her terms, and I think that's appropriate. It might be that they can do something relatively simple at Brandon Road, like say increase the velocities to such a point that it's difficult for a fish to swim upstream. That would be doable, but maybe you know, the estimate of risk reduction is, you know, 50 to 60, 70%. Whereas to get to a higher level trips you up to, you know, spend 10 or 20 times that amount. That will be the challenge, and one of my concerns is whether that type of an analysis can be done as they do the Brandon Road study within the time constraints that they have. So I think what it behooves us to be is to be very engaged in the analysis that the Corps is just starting on Brandon Road, because that will tell us a lot. You know, I'm not aware of anybody else who will be looking at specific design of modifications at a lock, whether you're talking about an existing Brandon Road lock or an ANS lock concept that is yet to be, I think, fully researched. But those are going to be some of the key elements that I think will help move this conversation forward.
let me go to Carl and then come back to Helen.
Thank you, John. Kind of a related issue. I mean, regardless of what happens at Brandon Road, it's going to be a while. It's not going to happen in the near future. So I guess the other question then is, what steps are being taken to continue an aggressive monitoring program to make sure that something isn't slipping through the fence? I know in Ohio and other states we've used eDNA in the past couple of years, and we've had a lot of, I guess, false positive hits. It could come from a variety of sources, and so you run the risk of either not taking those seriously or causing deep concern that may not be necessary. Is there anything in the works right now to enhance the monitoring program to determine, are we getting detections? Are they valid? Where are they fish? Are they still in the streams? Are they in the lakes? Where are they?
Maybe I can try to respond, and is Kevin Irons still up? This is the guy who really knows stuff, and I don't know what the protocol is.
Well, why don't you start, and then Kevin, you can make your way to the and add if you need to.
My understanding is quite a comprehensive effort continues to be underway, as it has been since 2009, when the first discovery was made. Obviously, something's being done up in Canada because they're finding them at Point Pelee and in Toronto, and it might be good to hear a little bit on the Canadian side what they're doing as well. But Kevin knows this stuff the best.
So I guess I could just offer that both Ontario and Michigan have come to Illinois and trained up on how to catch some of Asian carps, and we continue to talk on those levels. Our plan is very adaptive and has changed quite a bit since our first year. I think I showed you geography. We're looking near Lake Michigan, and now we took the fight to them. We have better tools. Fish and Wildlife Service, because of investment into what they call poupiere nets and push trawls, we're able to find these small fish. Well, they're 90 miles downstream of Lake Michigan, and that was really important. But now we have high confidence we can catch them and tell you where they are and where they aren't. We've done similar efforts in upstream reaches and haven't found them. So we continue to be adaptive. We meet annually and really look at our work plan across all the agencies to make sure we're addressing those appropriately.
I would add, and maybe you could address this just briefly, that in some cases we're talking sort of generically about Asian carp, but we're really very much talking about 4 different species of carp, each with a different DNA footprint, and sometimes the finding of a carp may mean grass carp in Lake Erie, for instance, which is very different than bighead and silver coming up the Mississippi River system. So there's a bit of an art and a science to the communication side of this, and I can well imagine that can get very confusing to the public.
eDNA has been part of our efforts since 2009. We continue to use it. However, we don't use it to engage resources now because of all the other sources, whether it's birds, barges, bilges, or a swimming fish. We've adapted it. Fish and Wildlife Service is now looking downstream to come up with the appropriate relative abundance, if you would, of eDNA in the watershed and inform us some more. So it's in the background. eDNA is much more important for a fish like black carp, where you're not thrust in the middle of the world's biggest population. That black carp marker is being developed and will help us out figuring out the range of that. It still has the same concerns about being moved around by barges and water, but we hope that population is much smaller and be much more informative than bighead or silver carp eDNA currently.
Thank you. Helen, you've been waiting patiently.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to emphasize what I heard in the comments of the panel is the importance of speed. And many follow-up comments are absolutely raising important questions, but all of us around this table run organizations, institutions, agencies where probably the most significant decisions we make as leaders, we've had less than perfect information, and we have not had full consensus across our organizations or among our constituents. And the costs of this issue, if we slow down too much or delay, are extraordinary. And I think it's an issue of just leadership and sometimes calling shots when it's less than perfect. But all of these activities we've heard described have moments in time where we will be adapting as we go. Adaptive management was a really important point at the very beginning of today's meeting. And we have to find a way to move forward and actually adapt as we go. And I think speed is just the most important thing because of the cost of nothing or a delay. I think the co-benefits that were mentioned across these interesting constituencies where they can actually pitch in, et cetera, are really valuable to take advantage of and a good model for us.
Thank you, Helen.
First, thanks for inviting the GLFC commissioners here today. It's a great event and it's proven to disseminate a lot of information quickly. At the risk of sounding like an alarmist, I want to look at this just a little differently for a minute. In my brief time with the commission, it seems that every news report I get announces the carp coming closer and closer and closer to the Great Lakes. It looks to me that we're still going to be saying that before we come up with a solution. Even though we're trying very, very hard with very, very many unproven technologies that have been talked about here today, that this might work, this is working partially, this is a 50% guarantee. What I see is that we're going to still be talking, and the $7 billion fishery in the Great Lakes is going to go down the drain if we don't do something a lot more rapidly than we're talking. That said, I have read, and I think there's a couple of people here today will probably disagree with me, but I have read that the value of the shipping in the cause is going down. Now, I was led to believe that I'm a little wrong there, but in any event, what I'm looking at is the value of the shipping in the cause, does it surmount the value of the fishery in the Great Lakes? If so, well, we keep talking. If not, then I think we should be looking at intermodal transportation until we come up with a definitive solution. Because if we don't, after we lose the Great Lakes, if they get in there, we're not going to be here holding meetings.
So there is precedent in the Chicago area to address the type of complex issue that is being faced, whether it's Brandon Road or another point of infrastructure investment. The Create Rail program is a series of 72 projects to untangle the rail network around the city of Chicago. That program has been going on for about 15 years. They are a third of the way through. They have a third that are in planning or construction, and they have a third that are on the shelf. That was initiated by former Mayor Daley to reduce congestion in the Chicago area, primarily after a snowstorm shut down the rail network across North America. Not just the US, North America. That's Canadian Pacific, Canadian National, BNSF, CSX, all of them except Kansas City Southern, who just was a little south down by Springfield. That since they've started doing that, rail delays in the Chicago area, despite increased traffic, have gone down a significant amount. The joke used to be you could get from the port of LA, Los Angeles to Chicago in 48, and it took you about 52 to get through. Now that number is down to 36. The amount of traffic predicted by the Illinois Department of Transportation and the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, the MPO that has the region, have all traffic increasing. And I think a big sign of the importance of that network as a whole is last year in August, the U.S. Department of Energy, U.S. Army Corps, U.S. Department of Transportation, Mayor Emanuel, and numerous others had a quadrennial energy review right here in Chicago. That was under President Obama's orders. It was the only quadrennial energy review to look at the nation's energy policy that was not held in an area where energy was produced. That is, it wasn't Bakken crude, it wasn't windmills in Iowa, it wasn't a solar plant, it was in the Chicago area because the amount of traffic going through has a significant impact on the energy policy of the U.S. When you start to look at that as a whole, and my members have had a lot of debate on the fishery number, and I do stress that our policy at the Illinois Chamber is we can have both. Let's look at this from the comprehensive point of view. I don't think those kinds of statements are helpful to the conversation because it does start to stress one type of economy before another. And in fact, one of the questions that continues to come up at the advisory group meetings is what is the actual value of the fishing industry? What is the actual value of the waterways industry? And I can tell you from our foundation's point of view, we are looking up our number. So speaking on behalf of the business community here in Illinois, I don't want to try and play that game of whose economy is more important. Because we have seen the impact that just a handful of the 150 plus invasive species that have come through the St. Lawrence Seaway can play on the Great Lakes region. We don't want to have that again. But understand that if you go down that route and something happens and the cause are shut down, you will feel it across the U.S. That could be the Panama Canal with traffic possibly shifting east, possibly not. There are a lot of unknowns. But I think the stress, again, needs to be reinforcing the work that Kevin Irons and others are doing to stop this today, while groups such as the Cause Advisory, and if you'd like to come to one of the meetings, I'm sure Dave Ulrich or Tim Eder would be happy to tell you about that. Please come by and see the amount of groups we have around the table and how stressful it can be for some of us to sit around there. So I would just ask that you be very, very careful, because there are a lot of groups on both sides of this issue that are about a half inch from walking away, and now is not that time. We need to focus on the short term. We need to do what we can to protect all of the economic assets. I would like the Great Lakes region to be competing with China in terms of economic numbers. And after hearing the minister earlier and the amount of investment they're putting into their port infrastructure and surrounding area, it sounds like you can have that environmental protection as well as that economic investment.
If I could, John, the Port of Indiana has 3 ports, one of them at Burns Harbor on Lake Michigan shoreline. And in 2010, in an attempt to answer some of the questions we had at the advisory committee, they did have a firm do an economic study. And out of the $14 billion annual revenues at the Port of Indiana at Burns Harbor, 1.9 were directly responsible by utilizing the Chicago area waterway system. And that's just one entity of many businesses that use the cause. So I did want to let you know there are some firm numbers out there in response to your question.
Thank you. I've got 2 more. I've got Helen and then back to John, and then I think we'll close this session.
Just one thing I really wanted just to remind us all of is we often focus this discussion around carp. And in fact, there are 10 species on their way up the Mississippi, 19 more going towards the Mississippi that are, the scientists can tell you their names. They stand to be as damaging as carp. And so we really are talking about a much bigger issue. And I just wanted to remind everyone of that.
Thank you. Tim, maybe you could comment on this. My question is for commissioners. What's the role of the commission in weighing in on this subject? And what's the value of the commission's role, as well as who else is critical in moving forward? I think it is important that we have clarity around this table, what our goal is to engage, and then what that timeline would mean for the commission's work.
Thanks, John. That I can offer some thoughts on that. And from the outset, the commission has played a couple of roles. One we undertook an initial investigation with the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, where we with the blessing of the commission, we initiated an evaluation, a study of the feasibility of physical separation. And as Tim Brown described, since then and since the report of the Army Corps of Engineers, we've pivoted. We've pivoted significantly in terms of we're now playing the role of convener of the advisory committee. And I just want to clarify that the advisory committee's job is to develop a set of recommendations to Congress, principally, but that every member of the advisory committee, including the Great Lakes Commission, is going to be given an opportunity to evaluate and vet and decide and authorize me, essentially, to either sign on to the recommendations of the advisory committee or not. I can tell you that the advisory committee's product that's going to come out this winter is not going to be the final answer. I mean, we're just, as you can gather from the discussion and from what you've heard and just from what you know, this issue is not going to be resolved in a final way by the end of December. We've made tremendous progress. We have, we've answered a lot of questions, but there are still really important questions about the viability, feasibility, effectiveness of an A&S lock, for example, that we just don't have the answers to. And so I would like to tell you that there will be a solution presented to the Great Lakes Commission for your consideration that will solve this problem or not in December, but that's not the case. We're going to continue to work on this for several years to come. The commission will be, the staff will be consulting with the board and the commissioners for input on that, on whether or not we endorse the advisory committee's recommendations. But we're going to be continuing to work on this issue for some time, and that's going to involve, you know, supporting the work of the federal and state agencies to monitor and evaluate. And it's also going to involve work to provide the Corps, make sure that the Corps has the resources and the support of Congress and the funding and the input needed from the states and provinces as it continues its work around Brandon Road. So we see ourselves being the, you know, helping facilitate and represent the state's interests in that forum. I just, as I think we're probably going to wrap up here, I wanted to also make one final point, and that is that you know, the work of the advisory committee has been extremely challenging, and it's been contentious, and we've worked hard, and we've made a lot of progress. I mean, we really came up with the Brandon Road solution. That interim short-term solution was a product of the work that the advisory committee did. And as I indicated, the work is not going to be completed in December. But there was a time this summer when I was feeling really discouraged that, you know, we'd had some tough meetings, and it was not clear that we were really going to get there by the end of the year. But I talked to one of our advisory committee members, and I hope she doesn't mind if I call her out, but it was Cathy Buckner from the Council of Great Lakes Industries, and she's been a stalwart at these meetings over the years. And I was kind of expressing my frustration, and Cathy said, you know, we are going to solve this problem because it's what we do. We are a coalition of Great Lakes organizations that work together, we collaborate, and we solve tough problems. And we simply have to find a solution to this problem, no matter how long it takes us. And she really gave me a lot of encouragement that no matter how hard this is, we have a history as the Great Lakes Commission and as regional organizations in general to work together to solve complex problems. So with that, we will solve it.
Am I on here? Thank you. Thanks for the our preliminary speak. Cathy, you are a wise woman. That was good advice to Tim and the rest of the group to keep at it. We do solve complex problems. So thank you for your encouragement there. As we come to this end of this portion of our agenda, I want to say just a quick few words in closing. We've really had a dynamic, interesting, thoughtful conversation. This is a complex issue by any stretch of the imagination. It's one that's been going on for a while. I think you see a number of parties growing and understanding as they really sit with each other and understand the depth and the dimensions of the issue that we're really trying to solve here. I know that the threat of Asian carp invasion is something that my governor worries about. It's something he's personally engaged in. It's something he asks us. I'm looking at my colleague Tammy Newcomb. It's something he asks us regularly about. He has gone on the record publicly as saying he does not believe we're going fast enough to solve what is an imminent threat, and has asked us and the Corps and others to work towards that end with all due speed before that risk is beyond our capacity to manage. So I do know that that's high on his list. He wants to see a solution and really has not been satisfied with the pace of progress, although we have to continue to put ourselves to that work. I think you can tell from the conversation that more work is done The threat, though, I think is real, that we all recognize. I agree with Cathy and Tim in their assessment that we can solve this problem. We can find a solution to it. That's what we do. We've dealt with complex issues in the past. It's just something that we're going to have to keep at and work our way through our frustrations and our concerns for this, and really understand each other's points of view. We will be looking forward to the recommendations from the cause advisory, discussing with the boards and our delegations, working with the other commissions and the others as well as we work through this critical issue. We've been around 60 years. This is not the first of the complex problems we've dealt with, but it's the one that's before us, and excuse me, and one we will continue to work through. I want to thank our speakers again. I really, and thank the commission, the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission, for joining us. And let's not make it 60 years before we do this again. Because I'm not going to be here at 1:20. So, but I'd love to. I really enjoyed sitting with you today and exploring this topic. I know it's of interest to all of our constituencies, and really something that we need to continue to work with together on this. I think this has worked well, and I hope we have an opportunity to look for other issues, and we'll certainly be able to celebrate our mutual 60th. It's going to be the 60th club coming up here tonight at the shed.